Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the May 4th Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. My name is Luke Mortensen, and tonight I'm with Catherine Week, Staff Liaison to the Board of Zoning Appeals. We will work alongside the chair to facilitate the meeting's proceedings. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast live on the city's YouTube channel and public access cable channel 25. During the meeting, please mute yourself when not actively speaking. Please keep your video on for the duration of the meeting. If you are participating by phone, you can enter *6 to mute and unmute your phone. There will not be screen sharing as a part of the meeting this evening. All attachments, reference materials, and submissions from the public are included in the agenda packet. The chair will call for in-person and virtual public comment for those who wish to speak. All motions will need to be stated clearly. After a motion is made and seconded, staff will call on each board member individually to provide their vote. Staff will then need to announce whether the motion carried and the count of the vote. At this point, I will throw it to Catherine for a quorum call.
Good evening, board members. Catherine Week, Staff Liaison. Go ahead and call roll. Hill?
Yes.
Harrod?
Present.
Rankin?
Here.
Shalinsky?
Here.
Matthews?
Here.
And we do have quorum. Thank you.
All right. Very good. This is Board Chair Shalinsky. I want to welcome everybody and thank you for your participation. On the agenda, item B is communications. Are there any communications to come before?
Catherine Week. So we did have several communications that came in earlier today, but they did get uploaded to the packet. So you should have everything before you as far as communications go.
Item B, disclosure of ex parte communications and/or abstentions for specific agenda items. And have anything to report with regard to that? Item C, any agenda items that will be deferred?
Catherine Week, Staff Liaison, we do not have any agenda items that will be deferred this evening that were not already deferred prior to the meeting, the agenda packet post.
All right. So we will proceed now with item number 1. Consider a request for variance B-23-00125 as provided by section 20-1309 of the Land Development Code of the City of Lawrence, 2018 edition. This is a request for variance from section 20-601 sub B, density and dimensional requirements or standards. And this is to reduce the setback from 25 feet to 1 foot on the front side. Exterior side setback along 9th Street from 25 feet to 3 feet 9 inches. And the interior side setback from 20 feet to 10 feet. This was submitted with regard to the property at 900 Pennsylvania Street by the Watkins Law Office on behalf of Louise's Inc., the property owner of record. Staff, do you have a report? Please share it.
Yes, I do. This is Catherine Week, Staff Liaison. And I'm going to present the item before you for 900 Pennsylvania Street. This is a request for variance from the section that Board Member Shalinski has noted, 2601B, specifically the density and dimensional standards related to setbacks for the IL district. The request has three parts, one related to front setback, which would be reducing from the required 25 feet to 1 foot. Would be a reduction from 25 feet to 3 foot 9 inches, and a request use the interior side setback from 20 feet to 10 feet. And the request stems from the applicant's rehabilitation structure on the site for a quality restaurant use. The site was recently rezoned from the IG district to the IL district, which the I district previously did not permit the use. This rezoning from IL does permit the quality restaurant use, and the use is similar to a use that had existed prior on the site, but has been vacant since 2014. So the applicant are trying to take a path towards compliance with current codes and still utilize the building that is existing on the site. And so specific to variance requests, we have 5 criteria, and the variance application needs to meet all 5 of the criteria to be considered for approval. Staff analyzes those 5 criteria, the first of which being that the variance request arises from conditions that are unique to the property, not ordinarily found in the same zone or district, and are not created by the actions of the applicant or owner. In this case, as I mentioned, the property has been rezoned from IG to IL. It is typically IL districts are intended for larger size lots, 20,000 square feet in minimum dimension. This particular existing parcel, which was part of an original town site plat, is smaller than a typical IL district would permit, and has roughly 5,850 square feet. And so the zoning standards that are set for the IL district do anticipate a larger site. Those setbacks that exist currently in its platted configuration where the building was originally situated was intended more for a town site or residential type layout for that original town site plat. And the building has existed in that location for numerous decades, as outlined in the staff report and the history of the property. And so staff does feel, well, I should note too that the property having those existing non-conforming encroachments on the setback, there was a loss of nonconformity for this particular property back in 2020. Because the property was vacant for a period longer than 12 months, it did lose its nonconforming status. And the nonconforming section of our code does note the intent of which is to bring nonconformities into conformance with existing codes. And there are notes about how the properties lose nonconforming status and how they can come back into compliance. In this instance, the building setbacks basically render only a small 5-foot wide strip of buildable area down the center of the parcel, and would basically render the parcel undevelopable for any type of development that would occur on the property, even if the lot were cleared and it was a greenfield site. So there does, because of zoning and platting and the limitations that the lot and the existing structure have on it, it does create a unique circumstance not typically found in an IL district, not typically found in any other residential district, not really typical to any district where there's a small sliver of land that is actually buildable on the parcel. So staff did feel that it met the criteria for number 1, being that there are unique circumstances on the site due to platting, due to zoning, and due to the existing location of the building on the property. The second criteria is that the granting of the variance does not adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners. Staff does feel that
the rights are not being infringed upon on other property owners. They still have the right to utilize their properties for the uses that are intended in their zoning district. The use will be maintained solely on this property, and the variance request solely relates to this property. A notice did go out, and we did have several calls clarifying what the variance request was for. Staff did clarify that at the time we didn't have any follow-up questions at the time, but we have received several communications that are all included in your packet. Those late communications did get in today, so you should have them, or you should have had them available to you prior to the meeting to review. The third criteria is that the strict application of the provisions of the chapter for which the variance is requested constitutes an unnecessary hardship upon the property owner. And there's a very specific definition for unnecessary hardship outlined in the code. And it does note, that the condition is resulting from an application of the regulations when viewing particular property in its environment that is so unreasonable as to come arbitrary and capricious interference with the basic right of property ownership, or convincing proof exists that it's impossible to use the property for a conforming use, or sufficient factors exist to constitute a hardship that would affect or deprive the owner of their property without compensation. And it does also note that mere financial loss or the loss of a potential financial advantage does not constitute unnecessary hardship. So it should be noted that the financial aspects are not considered, but the use and the ability to utilize the property is. And so while the zoning of this parcel is not residential, the platting of the property was done at the time when the entire block was anticipated to be for detached dwelling structures. And it's a typical residential lot configuration for the East Lawrence area and parts of East Lawrence. This particular block face along Pennsylvania, it has a mix of older renovated residential structures and some that have not been renovated, a mix of different types of residential structures. And the block face does vary as far as setbacks go, ranging from some that are less than 5 feet, some that are less than 10 feet, and some that are greater than the intended setback of 25 feet. So there is a wide range of setbacks on this particular block face. There is also a similar situation on the block face of Delaware, which would be the back side of this block as well. Staff is of the opinion that based on the context of the original platted sites and the IL zoning district setbacks that have been placed upon the property due to the rezoning, does create a unique unnecessary hardship for any potential property owner of this site to develop it with a conforming use. So staff did feel that it does meet the definition of unnecessary hardship. The fourth criteria is that the variance desired will not adversely affect the public health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, or general welfare of the public. In staff's opinion, granting that requested variance does not create an adverse effect. Staff did feel that the request is reasonable based on the fact that it would basically require any type of variance to develop the property. And it was reasonable in staff's opinion to ask for a variance that was generating from where the structure currently exists on the property. The applicant is not requesting to encroach upon those setbacks any further. And staff did not feel that not having that further encroachment would infringe on or adversely affect the public. And then chapter 5, or criteria 5, that granting the variance desired would not be opposed to the general spirit and intent of the chapter. In staff's opinion, the variance request would not be opposed to the general spirit and intent of the Land Development Code, the existing building renovated for quality restaurant use as proposed, with the variance request for setback encroachments does still satisfy the statement in staff's opinion. Staff feels the variance request to cover the existing location of the structure, as I mentioned, is not unreasonable. And even the encroachment to the south is not encroaching further than the existing deck in that location is at this time. So a variance in some form, again, would be required to build any development on the site. And even if the development was on a vacant lot, this particular site would be unbuildable in its current state. And the applicant is working towards compliance by rezoning the property to a less intensive industrial district and still maintaining the structure on the site and attempting to rehabilitate it for a similar use that had occupied the structure in its most recent occupancy. So staff did feel that criteria 5 was met. So in conclusion, staff's analysis of the variance application did find that the request met all the 5 conditions and is recommending approval of the variance request in all 3 parts. That the first, the front setback be reduced from 25 feet to 1 foot. The exterior side setback along East 9th Street from 25 feet to 3 feet 9 inches, and the required interior side setback from 20 feet to 10 feet. And I would be happy to stand for any questions if you should have them or need clarification.
Okay, thank you. Do any members of the board have any questions on the staff report and recommendation?
Board Member Rankin, one question I have for staff. It looks like they're kind of getting rid of off-site parking. Is that a concern with what it was rezoned to?
Staff Liaison Kashmiri, I'm not sure I understand your question. So they will have some on-site parking. The off-site parking will be taking place, I'm assuming, along 9th Street or any additional lots in the district that the applicant has access to. But this particular site did receive a variance recently to reduce their parking requirements. And so they are still, at this time, providing some on-site parking. The rest of the parking would be off-site. Did that answer your question?
I think so, yeah. I think I misspoke. I meant on-site. I was just looking at the previous variance we granted and where they were showing the parking compared to this new proposed additional building. It looks like it's going right over it. So I was just curious.
So just to clarify, they still do have to provide the number of parking that the variance was. I think it was 4 spaces, if I'm not mistaken. They still have to provide those four spaces. It may not be in the exact configuration that was previously on the site, but they could provide those 4 spaces anywhere on the site based on their proposed development. And that would be ironed out in the staff report or in the site plan for that.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions? Okay, well, I do. The staff report under criteria 1 goes through quite a history of zoning codes and requirements over the course of many decades, and states that the property was constructed pre-1940. Does that refer to the stone building, or does that also refer to the deck that is to the west and south of the stone building?
Yeah, staff liaison Catherine Weeks. So that does refer to the building itself. I'm not sure staff is entirely clear exactly what year the deck was built on the site. It's been there for numerous years, but I don't know that we have the exact date or the year that went in.
So was any investigation done as to when the deck was built and whether or not it was in compliance with the zoning that was in place at that time? And if not, whether there was a variance and or a building permit that was issued for the construction of the deck?
So there wasn't in that particular case, primarily because the structure lost its nonconformity. So it's considered nonconforming now. So, and even though the applicant is proposing to construct a deck in a similar location, I'm not sure staff had the foresight to look to see if that was a non-compliant deck. I believe it was there prior to 1960, but I am not sure, so I cannot confirm that date.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right. We will now hear from the applicant.
Thank you, Board Member Shalinski, and good evening, Board. My name is Patrick Watkins. I'm an attorney. I'm here on behalf of Brad Ziegler. With me tonight is Mike Myers. He is the project architect. He works at Hernley Associates in East Lawrence. I'll start by saying I appreciate the staff's review on this. They obviously did a very thorough report, and there's several variances to consider. We carefully crafted each of those variances to only request what's absolutely needed for this project. And if you have any particular questions about why the variance steps are the way they are or what the request is about, I think Mike can very easily provide more information related to that. The staff report is clear, though, and you can read it on the first page. It says it in the second paragraph of the executive summary. It's the first sentence. And I would encourage you to read that one more time because it's really significant. Without a variance, development of the property would require demolition of the structure due to the lack of non-conforming status. Development of the property would require demolition. That's a significant statement, and I haven't seen that before. And as the staff has pointed out, this is in part due to the destruction of that nonconformity a couple of years ago. And I know the code can be a little tangled, but that line is significant. The stakes are high on this variance request. The property is not able to sit there if this variance request is not granted. A vote against the variance is a vote for the demolition of the building. A vote against the variance is a vote to redevelop this property from scratch without improvements. If that happens, by the way, we would be back again to request another variance because this zoning designation requires it, as do other commercial zoning designations. Nobody wants this property to be demolished. The building is a remarkable piece of history. It's the whole reason we're here. Brad Ziegler decided to invest in this particular property because this building deserves to be saved. The neighborhood plan notes that this building is important. And our planning documents talk about infill development and saving historic buildings. It's also important to remember that we've been through a rezoning. It's not related to what we're asking for tonight, but this property had to be rezoned down from general industrial to light industrial. Staff, planning commission, and city commission all authorized this use. In fact, the city commission unanimously approved the use of this property for quality restaurant. That is not the discussion point tonight, but it's important to remember that use has already been considered and it's not the subject of today's discussion. I would also note that if there was another zoning designation that someone would find more appropriate, these zoning designations too have setbacks that would have to be resolved at some point. I don't necessarily want to belabor the staff's report or the analysis on this because it seems very clear to me. We agree with the staff's analysis. You can see our application and our responses to each of the 5 elements for variances. We think the staff got it right. We think that we have the same position as the staff in large part, but all of the information is in the packet. We are available for any questions or comments that might come up. But I'll conclude by saying that old buildings need accommodation. Historic districts need accommodation. And sometimes that accommodation isn't once and it isn't twice. They need as much accommodation as is necessary in scenarios to save important buildings. This is a unique property and it should be saved. Denying the variance will require the demolition of the building. I'd like the opportunity to respond to any of the public comment at some point, but we are here for questions, and obviously thank you for your time and willingness to serve.
Do any of the board members have any questions for Mr. Watkins or Mr. Myers?
Mr. Chairperson, could I inquire of Mr. Watkins?
Sure, please.
I want to make sure that you've advised us that you're in agreement with the staff report, but I just want to make sure that you and staff are tracking. And I'm looking at the figure 3, which is on page 5 of the staff report, and what they're showing us is this light green area, running east-west through the center of the property. Do you see that?
I know the figure you're talking about.
Right. And so what staff member Weeks advised us is that's actually, if we apply the code, that's actually the buildable area on this lot. Is that right?
If the IL setbacks are applied, we have a 5-foot hallway that we can build through this property.
Like 5 feet, 6 feet wide, and I don't know. 75 feet long, something like that.
Right. And I would also note, board member, that it doesn't connect to our existing structure.
Right.
Even if that were able to be saved and stay, it would be a separate building.
So it's just, it's really not hyperbole to say that, if we started from just an empty lot, you would have to come back here and apply for just all sorts of variances to do anything on this lot, no matter what, right?
That's correct.
Right. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Going one more time, any other questions? I may have some after public comment. Okay. We are ready for the public hearing portion of this item. So we open it up to members of the public to give your input. Please state your name and whatever you need
Hi.
to say.
I'm Phil Collison, and I guess I have my Elna hat on. I have a Penn Street line hat on, and I'm a citizen live down the street. This place does require unique setbacks, and I think that's because it is a part of the original town site before there was zoning, before there was setbacks. I know it was a residential house for a long time before it became a bar. I think we're a little more focused on that the setback to the west side going a foot from the sidewalk. We're disappointed that it come so close to the neighbor on the south, but they seem to be working with the developer okay on that, and but we're disappointed that they're forced into that situation. In my opinion, they're trying to put a square peg into a round hole and expect the neighbors or the city to make it fit their needs. And also, in my opinion, there is a negative impact to the neighborhood, and I think that's pretty obvious. Nobody would want anything 10 feet from their house or a bar across the street for them or built down the street. It would be different if you knew that the zoning allowed that when you moved in. That's the beauty of zoning and planning, is that you can predict the future. And this is kind of comes up at the last minute, and we don't think that it's good for the neighborhood and the overall stability of the neighborhood. I think it's going to lead to more rental property and less owner occupied. I believe the deck was built in the late 70s, and it was a very controversial thing. And since it shouldn't be used as the definite footprint of the building, because it is a temporary addition. And thank you for letting me share my thoughts.
Do any of the board members have any questions for Mr. Collison?
Chairperson Shalinski, could I inquire of Mr. Collison?
Sure.
Yes.
Hi, Phil.
Hi.
I have a dim memory that this thing, it got its first non-conforming use permit, like it was in the 80s sometime, wasn't it?
I think it's the late 70s when it, I think it was at the governor's Hayden's brother, might have been I think was the initiator of the bar.
And then it sat there as a bar. Then it stopped being a bar. It got shut down in the early 10s, 11s, 12s, something like that, right?
Yeah, I think it was, well, yeah, I think
Somewhere
about 14 is when they lost the grandfathered 3-2 bar capability. And that's a real key, is that it was a 3-2 bar. It closed at midnight and never was a real busy place except occasional Thursday nights.
Right. So you heard the discussion about, what the actual buildable area on this lot is, right?
Yes.
So just opine for me. So what would the neighbors want to see an owner do with this lot?
Ideally, put in a coffee house or something that serves breakfast and lunch, that had a simple menu and did breakfast and lunch kind of coffee house kind of thing. That would be a real nice use. And I've talked with friends of mine about doing just that there, but it's a pipe dream.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Do we have other public comment?
You do. Good evening. I'm Marcy Francisco. I live at 1101 Ohio Street in Lawrence, but I am one of the members of Penn Street Line that are owners of 2 properties across the street to the west of this property we're discussing. So I heard the comment that no one wanted to see any of this demolished, but I would like to say I would indeed like to see the porch part of this property removed. It has been an eyesite, and there was a lot of discussion and concern when that was first built. So I do recognize that it's a small lot for an industrial use, but the industrial zoning was made at the request of this applicant. And I think the planning commission and the city commission responsibly down zoned this from a more intense industrial use. But the planning staff said that they would not recommend commercial zoning for this site because it was too close to other commercial properties and does not fit, because of that would not fit our guidelines. So clearly we need to do something about the variances on this site. And I do agree that we want to protect the existing building. Although I would say a lot's being done to protect this building. So it would be nice to see it listed, at least on the local register. So there's some guarantee that that is in fact what the applicant is interested in doing. So I did write a letter and I don't have objections to the variances that are proposed on either the north or the south. But I think the variance on the west could either be limited to the 15-foot 5 inches that would allow this existing masonry structure to be maintained, or there could be a consideration, because that's a door, of a landing, but it does not have to go to within 1 foot of the west property line. Stairs could come up from 9th Street to that landing. And in fact, I think the applicant has indicated that they are looking to have a lot of the activity towards the north and the east. It would make a lot more sense if this were part of the warehouse district. I think both in terms of the previous parking discussion and also in terms of these setbacks. But again, these are 3 different setbacks, and I would ask the Board of Zoning Appeals to consider reducing the setback. I guess it wouldn't be reducing, but actually increase the setback to the west, so there is more protection for that neighborhood, and so that a building could not be built right up to the edge of the, or a foot from the sidewalk. So I very much hope that this building is preserved. Again, the Board of Zoning Appeals can't give us any guarantee for that. You're only establishing setbacks. And the other development, the other neighbors have to meet those setbacks. I would hope that there would be some reasonable setbacks for this property. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any board members have questions? Okay, I have one. Do you have any knowledge or information about when the deck was built and whether or not there were any variances or building permits related to it? Since you were at one time a city commissioner, I thought perhaps you might have some information about that you might remember from those times. If so, we'd appreciate it, or I would.
Thank you. I do remember the discussion about this building, and Jane Eldridge could probably give us some more details about it. But my understanding is that the variance to allow the bar, and it may not have been, or the zoning to allow the bar, was given just shortly before I joined the city commission in 1979. So that, I believe, had happened.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any other public comment? Either in the room or on Zoom?
No Zoom comment.
Okay,
Speak as partly public and partly project, I suppose.
sure.
Mike Myers, I'm with Hernley Associates Architects, and I am involved with the project. I would say, firstly, most of the work we do, or a large piece of it, is historic preservation and reconfiguration kind of work. And I get nervous every time I hear the word demolition. I really wouldn't be interested at all in this project if it were a demolition project. So by all means, our goal is to save this building and put it back into a good use for the neighborhood and for the city. And I've seen some comments of the neighborhood comments that came in the staff report. This is not a large scale development. We're putting an addition on the back that will enable us to take that historic structure and basically put some of the new functions that it didn't have or didn't provide well in the existing structure and put those in the new structure, like ADA compliant bathrooms, new ramps to get someone into the building so that a customer can enjoy everything in the building that everyone else can enjoy, get food and drink there. To suggest that this is a large project or a large addition, is a little disingenuous. It's a small lot. This is an adaptive reuse project. It's not a huge traffic generating type of project. I'm an East Lawrence resident. I fully expect myself to be there on a bicycle. There's a lot of comments about the west setback. Really, we are, I don't know if you've seen the plans, we're significantly reducing that west deck. We completely agree with the neighbors, with Marcy and Phil, that deck, it was probably inappropriate when it was built. It's a large congregating space out on the west, on the front of the building. We're effectively taking it off and replacing it with a landing and steps in its same location. The landing that's there, it's not a deck. It's not intended to be a place for people to gather. But, we have to remember this is a historic building with a primary entrance on that west facade. We need steps and something to stand on to get into that door. And that's about all we've provided. So it's not as if we're trying to continue that use. We, in the design of the building and the design of the addition, we effectively took the setback that the large deck had, and we used that as our line to design a building that focuses sound and activity towards the north away. So we're taking the part of the building that was, we felt, sort of the worst acoustical problem potentially for the neighborhood, and we're moving it inside the building and facing it towards the opposite direction and well away from neighbors. And I think we've come a long way to getting some support from some neighbors at this point. So we're really hopeful that everybody can come together and support the staff's recommendation, and so the project can move forward. I'm happy to stand for any questions anyone would have of me on building related stuff or site related stuff. There was a comment about parking. The parking, I don't think anything changed there. I'm not sure what one of the board members was seeing, but we didn't really change the way the parking was working, to my recollection. So, any questions for me?
Questions for Mr. Myers?
This is Dean. I have a question for him. Mr. Myers, what will the new setback be on the landing then? How far will it be from the sidewalk approximately?
Effectively, I could probably tell you here, I believe the landing is about 6 feet from the front door, and I believe the building Actually, I'll grab the site plan. Sure, this one. Dimension on that. The current design of the front deck area is 9 feet from the face of the building, and the steps effectively end up taking the handrail extensions very close to the property line. So that's where, within 1 foot, and that's where that 1 foot setback comes, which is essentially where the steps for the current deck come now. There was a comment about potentially taking the steps to the north instead and reducing that front setback. That probably could be done, but the grades drop off significantly at the north side. So those stairs would effectively maybe actually off the property line at that point, going if they went to the north, because there's effectively a 4 foot tall or 5 foot tall hill that's mounted up against the north side of the building that those steps would have to navigate to get down to the public way. So I'm not convinced that would be a really viable alternative there. So does that answer your question? So as far as the distance away, you'd asked, so we're at 9 feet away from the face of the building, and the face of the building is, forgive me, the site plan that I have doesn't have the actual building.
You've got it at 15.5 on the concept.
15.5. So we're at 4 feet from the property line, effectively 5 feet from the property line, roughly, with the I'm not 100% sure. I hate to give you numbers if I don't actually have them here on a drawing. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, how wide will the landing itself be?
It's 13 feet wide.
13 feet wide, okay.
Our thought there is it would be just enough to try to get people to be able to come and go from the building without being on top of each other effectively. We don't see that as a seating area of any kind. It's more of a place where if the owner is using the front door for for customers to come and go, someone could stand out there while they're waiting for their table, essentially. At this point, though, we do think that most of that kind of activity is going to happen on the north.
All right. So will it run the whole width of the north face?
No, it does not. It is the width of the north face is 20 feet, and the landing is 13 feet.
Okay.
So that there's 7 feet of blank space along the north side of the west facade.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? I have a question. Do you know why the owner applied for a demolition permit?
Yes, I do. He applied for, I believe, and I haven't ever done it myself, but I believe the application for a demolition permit is the same if you're doing interior demolition or building demolition. And I think he just didn't fill it out correctly. I believe there's a checkbox or something that's for interior only, and he just didn't check it out, didn't check the box. His intent is to pull a permit so that he could begin removing finishes and so forth, so he can start restoring the building on the interior. That's to the best of my knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And do you have any information about when the deck was built and whether or not it was pursuant to building permits and or variances?
I don't. I've lived in Lawrence since 1984, and it's been there as long as I can remember. I think, maybe in the late 80s, I'm sure I had spent time on that deck. So that's as the extent of my knowledge on it. I haven't seen old photos or anything of it. So I can't tell you.
All right. Many thanks.
Welcome.
Is there any other public comment on this item?
Can I just ask one question?
One question.
Is it ever possible to limit a setback to a particular
Footprint?
footprint? Not a footprint, but to say it's possible to have a 1 foot setback on the north 30 foot of this lot, and then the 25 foot setback would apply to the remaining part of the lot. If that's not possible, then I think that's something we should start to do in our land development code, because I think this is a case where the setbacks are more understandable with the plan, but because they go all the way across the lot, and if this project doesn't go forward, then there could be a much larger structure put on that would meet code because the setbacks are not at all limited.
Staff?
Would you, I would say you go ahead and finish public comment, and then I can come back to that when you close public comment and the board is up for discussion. I will answer that question for
Fair enough.
Marcy.
Okay. Other public comment? All right. Do I have a motion from anyone to close the public hearing portion of this item? Or are we going to sit here in silence?
Mr. Chair, this is Board Member Travis or Travis Herod. I'll move to close public comment.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, moved by Herod, seconded by Rankin. Staff, will you please call the roll?
Yeah. Staff member or staff liaison Catherine Week, Hill,
Agree.
Herod,
Aye.
Rankin.
Aye.
Shalinski,
Aye.
Halos.
Aye.
Okay, public comment is closed.
Okay. We now bring this for board discussion. And do people have any comments or discussion prior to making a motion?
Mr. Chair, why don't we go ahead and have Catherine advise on the point you raised a moment ago?
Thank you.
This is staff liaison Catherine Week. So the question basically, as I understand it, is can you kind of modify the outline of the setback and have it vary for a certain percentage of the lot line? I'm not sure that that's entirely clear in our current development code. And Ms. Francisco is correct that if for some reason the variance was granted and this project didn't go forward, that variance still holds there until such time as the building permit were to be pulled. Basically, it would be valid unless a building permit had not been pulled. If this particular project were to not go through, that building permit would not be pulled. So in that case, for this particular project, the variance may not hold. I have to do a little bit more digging on whether or not, a later project, perhaps by the same applicants, were to come forward. Then if that building permit were submitted during the time that the variance was still valid, which I believe is 24 months, then Ms. Francisco is correct that
line or that 1 foot line could potentially be the line that would be the build to line. If that answers the question, I think that was the gist of the concern, that if this project does not go forward, then that project could be built out. That may be a case where, the applicant may need to address whether or not the intention is for another project in the future, or if this is the project. So.
So to follow up, what I think I heard was that it's not really clear whether we can do that or not.
So the board does have, this is staff liaison Catherine Weekend, the board does have some leeway for conditions. It may be possible to craft a condition that, the setback is for a set distance on that property. I'm not sure we've had one like that in the past. Typically conditions are those that, for instance, when multiple applications are in review through the planning office, sometimes platting applications or site plan applications have, a necessary variances in order, and the variance would be conditioned upon whether or not that plat was approved. Those are typical conditions that we see. The code does not specify the specific type of conditions. So, I would just, guide the board that you should be, contemplating those conditions as you're thinking about them, if that's the route you're going. I may just add to that. It may be worth discussing a little more too, that initially, I think the concern, and I may be speculating, and you may want to ask again for clarification, either, from the applicant, but I think the plans maybe perhaps were misread, because the dark line is currently indicating where the existing structures are on the property, and the shaded hatch line is indicating the proposed. And it does look like the existing elevated deck structure would remain if the dark line is the actual. So there may have been some communication in the reading of the plans as far as what aspects of the existing building would be continuing to go out to that 1 foot line. And the applicant may be able to explain that a little further, but.
I would like to ask the applicant if there would be any objection to limiting the reduction in setback in the west setback to the northern portion of the lot, as opposed to extending the entire width of the lot.
Our objection is primarily procedural, but it should be premised on the fact that it's wholly unnecessary. One, there would be a site planning process anytime you change your site and make additions. And that site planning process would go back through the public comments, and staff would continue to advocate on behalf of the residential transition of the neighborhood. I don't think that I could get one approved if it was asked, but on top of that, every step of the way, including very early on in this project, we had written commitments to the neighbor to the south that we would do 5 things. These were read at the Planning Commission. These were read at the City Commission during the rezoning. We would make commitments about lighting, about noise, about the hood and vent. And the first commitment that we made was about the site design, projecting all activity to the north, creating improvements that shield activity from the residential neighbors. This includes removing the existing deck and redesigning the front entrance. We've spent a lot of time and resources reviewing these plans at every step of the way, including with neighbors, including with the East Lawrence Neighborhood Association. Complicating this process beyond what we already have seems like a redundancy that is absolutely unnecessary. unnecessary. We are building the deck that is shown on the plans, and we've already made written commitments to do so and shield the residential neighbors. Adding additional stipulations is entirely within the board's direction, but I don't know that you even have clear ability to do so. And I hate to complicate my clients' processes beyond what they've already come to. I think that we've been delayed on multiple occasions in this project, and I think we're facing a range of other issues on the feasibility front. So that's my comment. I think it's entirely unnecessary. We're building the deck that's shown, a much reduced deck. As Catherine noted, it is the smaller, much smaller version of the deck shown on those plans. So that would be the applicant's position. We're building that deck, and I don't know exactly what foot marker it is from the north boundary line of the lot. I think we'd have to do some sort of analysis to figure out what we need and how far the distances are.
Thank you. Any other discussion or questions?
Mr. Chair, I'll go if you'll permit.
Go ahead.
Responding to what Mr. Watkins was just talking about, just sort of in general, I would, from my professional background, I see it like this. I think that this is what I plan to do, and this is what I would encourage my colleagues on the board to do, is I would look at what has been presented to us by staff and just make it a straight up or down vote without modification. And the reason I say that is because, when we start modifying stuff and we're a little bit unclear of the reason for it, or we're unclear of our mandate, whether we even can do it and to what extent, then it just creates a potential for error and litigation as a result of that error. So I think if we just vote straight up or down on what's in front of us, it makes our decision more defensible. If we vote with staff, fine. If we vote against the staff recommendation, it makes our decision more defensible if someone were to decide that, they need to take this to the next level, to the district court. So that being said, as far as my vote, I think people that know me know that there's been more than a few times that staff has come in, made a recommendation, and they advise that the 5 conditions haven't been met, one or more. And then I look at it and I tell myself that I think there's a more nuanced way to read this. And so then I look at it and I say, no, the 5 conditions have been met. And so then I vote accordingly. In this instance, as I look at it, the use that's being proposed here is allowable in this zoning district. So that's not an issue. The thing that we're talking about is we have these setbacks that have been created over years and years and years of evolution of our zoning and our land use code and whatnot, and it's made the site unbuildable. So we're here on that issue. And when I look at staff's analysis, the 5 conditions are so clearly met that there's not really any wiggle room for me. I am very appreciative of the neighborhood association and the neighbors coming out and advising us on this property and sharing with us their concerns and even, some alternative uses and whatnot. But just to get back to where I personally am is just staff's analysis is correct. The 5 conditions are met. And I don't really know how to back away from there as I sit here. So that's where my head is right now.
Other discussion?
This is Dean again. Did I understand from staff that this still has to go through the site plan approval after this?
Yeah, this is
Assuming-
Staff Liaison Catherine Week. Yes, it still has to go through site plan. I mean, this is close to what their site plan will likely be when they submit it, but they still have to go through the formal site planning process.
Based on that, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion for approval based on staff's report and the comments received.
Is there a second for the motion?
I'll second it. This is Tressa Hill.
Okay, moved by Palos, seconded by Hill. Is there additional discussion? Okay, I'm just gonna say that, I'm bothered by the, I'm bothered by what essentially looks like, the deck is being treated and grandfathered like the rest of the building when, I'll just say, I think it is of dubious origins in terms of its legality. So that will probably inform my vote, even though I think this is a great design and could be a really good project. Any other discussion? All right, I think we're ready to vote.
This is Staff Liaison Catherine Week. Hill,
Agree, yes.
Harrod,
Aye.
Rankin,
Nay.
Shalinski,
No,
Palos.
Aye.
So the motion does carry 3-2.
all right, thanks, everybody. Congratulations. Okay, the next item is a request for variance B-23-00126 as provided in section 20-1309 of the Land Development Code, 2018 edition. This is a request for variance of density and dimensional standards required by section 20-602 sub A of City Code. Applicant is seeking a variance to reduce the required front setback from a distance of 20 feet to 12 feet. Property location is 736 Mississippi Street. It is submitted by Darren Sinkler and Allison Sinkler, who are the property owners of record. Would staff please give your report?
Good evening, board members. Luke Mortensen, planner of Planning and Development Services Department. As Chair Shalinski noted, public hearing item number 2 is a variance from the required front setback for a lot in the RS5 district. The request is to reduce the required front setback from 20 feet to 12 feet at 736 Mississippi Street. As Catherine previously noted, criteria number 1 focuses on uniqueness based on a subject property's platting or zoning. The subject property is an approximately 4,690 square foot portion of a platted lot. The property was platted and recorded in 1870 as part of Lane's addition. This was 57 years prior to the adoption of zoning in the city of Lawrence in 1927. Per Douglas County records, the existing residential structure was constructed in 1910, 17 years before the adoption of zoning in Lawrence. The subject property was originally platted as a traditionally sized lot that is common in the older sections of Lawrence. These lots are generally 50 feet by 117 feet with a total lot area of 5,850 square feet. At some point in time, staff estimates between 1927 and 1968, the south 10 feet of the subject property were deeded away to the adjacent property addressed as 740 Mississippi Street. A title search could provide further information on this timeline. The deeding away of the south 10 feet resulted in a legally non-conforming lot designation for the subject property as it does not have the adequate lot width, lot frontage, or lot area for the RS5 zoning district. Additionally, the existing structure does not conform with the zoning district's required front and interior side setbacks. However, since the structure was constructed prior to the adoption of zoning in Lawrence, it is considered a legally non-conforming structure. Article 15 of the Land Development Code includes the rights and protections granted to legally non-conforming uses, non-conforming lots, and non-conforming structures. This includes the applicant's ability to extend building additions out to the existing non-conforming interior side setback and the right to reconstruct the house in the existing non-conforming location if destroyed. To conclude this first section, the surrounding zone and district contains several similar examples of platted lots that were made smaller or larger via deed action. A list and exhibit of examples on Mississippi and Indiana streets is included in the staff report. The subject property is generally rectangular, and staff does not believe that it exhibits conditions of uniqueness based in platting or zoning that warrant the reduction of the required front setback. Criteria number 2 focuses on potential adverse effects upon the rights of adjacent property owners or residents. In staff's opinion, the requested variance will not adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners. A reduced front setback would not restrict the adjacent property owners and residents from maintaining their existing code-compliant land uses. After the publishing of this staff report, we received several communications on this proposed variance. Written communications have been updated and included as attachments to the staff report. I also received a phone call of support from the property owner of 703 Indiana Street late this afternoon. Criteria number 3 focuses on unnecessary hardship. In staff's opinion, strict adherence to the Land Development Code would not constitute an unnecessary hardship as defined by Section 20-1701 of the Land Development Code and included in the staff report. The proposed variance would be a solution to a design preference rather than a relief mechanism to mitigate an arbitrary and capricious interference with the applicant's basic right of property ownership and does not deprive the applicant of his property without compensation. The subject property and the subject structure will remain a code-compliant detached dwelling land use, even if this variance request is denied. Criteria number 4 focuses on adverse effects on the public health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, and general welfare. In staff's opinion, granting the requested variance will not create an adverse impact upon the above listed items. The request in question is contained within the parcel owned by the applicants. It would not create any spillover noxious effects on the surrounding area. The 5th and final criteria is the effect and the impact on the general spirit and intent of the Land Development Code. In staff's opinion, approval of this variance is generally inconsistent with the spirit and intent of the Land Development Code. The variance process is intended to equalize the development process for properties that exhibit unique conditions and mitigate unnecessary hardships caused by strict adherence to our code. The code provides some relief mechanisms for exceeding the required setback distances. This includes the average front setback exception and the exception for certain architectural features like cornices, canopies, and overhangs, which may be located up to 2 feet into the required setback. An analysis of the average front setback is included in the staff report. As previously mentioned, since the existing house is a legally non-conforming structure, the applicant could rebuild the house in its exact location without a variance within 12 months of its damage or destruction. To conclude, staff recognizes the applicant's desire to establish a covered front porch within the front setback. However, per the decision-making criteria listed in Article 13 of the Land Development Code, staff must recommend denial of the proposed variance to reduce the required front setback from 20 feet to 12 feet for a lot in the RS5 district for the property address 736 Mississippi Street. With that, I'll wrap up and can stand for question, and our applicants and property owner are in person with us tonight.
Do any board members have questions for Mr. Mortensen? Okay. Let's hear from the applicants.
Thank you, Board Chair Shalinski. My name is Darren Sinkler with my wife, Allison Sinkler. We too are joined by Mike Myers from Hurley and Associates. We chose them for this particular project for a lot of different reasons, the reputation and their focus on when they design things, keeping it within the architectural integrity of whatever they're doing. In this case, Old West Lawrence is one of the key reasons we chose them. So thanks, Mike, for being here. We moved here in last fall, and this is our retirement home. This is a place that we dreamed of getting. When we saw the property come up for sale, we jumped on the opportunity to buy it, knowing that, and these are my words, it's a little bit of the ugly duckling on the block. And as I think Luke, you appropriately pointed out, is definitely unique to the neighborhood. Having been built in 1910 with the remaining houses, I haven't checked all of them, but they were after 1910. Ours does sit a little cockeyed on the lot, and it is closer. The front wall of our home is approximately 12 feet from the sidewalk. So it definitely has already been encroached upon on that. But however, being built in 1910, the challenge with the house right now is that we don't have a front porch. And when we drive up and down these streets in Old West Lawrence, that's one of the key things I think about these neighborhoods, especially Old West Lawrence, are the front porches that give a couple of different things. Number one, it gives some semblance to the rest of the neighborhood. They all have nice covered front porches. It allows neighbors and us as homeowners and friends and family to enjoy and sit out on the front porch. We don't have that opportunity now. It also provides some shelter when you're trying to come in from the sidewalk to come in, get out of the rain, get out of the whatever, and come up a few steps and onto the front porch. So those are some of the factors that we were thinking about when we bought the house and trying to envision what this could be and what it could look like. We understand that it is legally non-conforming, but it does present a hardship. And from my perspective and my wife's perspective, that we aren't able to enjoy the front of our home like we should. Nothing against the backyards in Old West Lawrence, but nobody really sees them or looks at them. It's all about the front yard and the front porch and being able to enjoy our neighbors and actually make the house look a little bit more like the rest of the neighborhood. It does definitely stand out. We do have plans to do additional things with painting and fixing some wood things and those types of things, general upkeep for the house. And this was a big part of that. Let's see, open to questions. I know we did have a lot of the support from neighbors, which we were really appreciative of. We were really concerned about that, being part of the Lawrence Preservation Alliance, having been to KU and been in Lawrence for quite some time, knowing how important architectural integrity is to that area. We wanted to make sure that we weren't doing something that would stand out, would upset neighbors, and would basically enhance the use and the look and the feel of not only our house and our use of that house, but the neighbors would feel the same. And from the letters and emails and phone calls that we've received, and I think you all have some too, I think they were all in agreement with that. This would be a welcome addition to the neighborhood.
And I'd like to add too, this is Allison Sinkler. I'd like to add also that I thought it was important to note that we did have a neighbor refer to saying that she wanted to deny any approvals personally. However, looking at our architectural plans, she wrote back and said that she would be in agreement because it wasn't that we were adding to the front of the house to a portion of the house that wasn't already in existence. It was just basically matching up with what is currently our living room at the time. So we're not trying to or ask the city to move a variance to add to the structure of our house, but only to really align the structure of our house, our living room that's already there, to just extend that line.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. One of the board meetings that I listened to and I thought was interesting was back in July of 22. There's a home at 815 Ohio that came up for a very similar request for variance on setback. And they had a similar situation that we did where their front wall of their family room was, I'm not sure how far it was back, but really it was almost like a garage port on the side of their house that went to their front door. Really unusable space, wasn't going to work for them. So they had bought this house very similarly to what we did with this vision of, boy, it would be great to have a nice little front porch on there. We drove by there actually today on the way here, and it looks absolutely fantastic. The big front porch across the front and down the side. We're a similar request, but we're just doing that side and not coming any further out than what the front wall of our home is already sitting at. So just for context of some history that I remember well.
Okay. Are there any questions for the applicants? Okay, apparently not at this time, but stand by in case that changes.
Will do. Thank you.
All right. Is there any public comment on this item?
There's nothing on Zoom.
Okay. And none in the room? All right. Do we have a motion to close the public hearing portion of this item?
Board Member Rankin, I'll make a motion to close public comment.
I'll second.
Okay, motion and second. Rankin, Harrod. Staff, will you call the roll?
Yeah, Staff Liaison Catherine Week. Hill,
Yes.
Harrod,
Aye.
Rankin,
Aye.
Shalinski,
Aye.
and Palos.
Yes.
And motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, so let's bring it to the board for discussion. Anyone?
Dean, I appreciated the staff's review of this, and particularly the comparison of all the other frontages or setbacks of all the houses along the let's see, that would be the east side of the street. And my conclusion was a little different in terms of the uniqueness. I thought because of the fact that they're almost all of them did not meet the required setback, and that they varied so much. And there's lots of explanations for that, obviously, about when they were built. I don't think it was like an intentional thing, but it just seems to me that in and of itself is unique, even to Old West Lawrence neighborhood, where I think the majority of the homes do meet the side yards or the front yard setbacks. But that was my only comment. I felt that in itself was unique, and what they're proposing to do was equally addressing a unique situation.
Okay. Thank you. Any other board discussion?
Mr. Chairperson, I note that I think 11 neighbors voiced their approval and one neighbor was an emphatic no.
Yes, I noticed that as well. Any other discussion? Well, I'm going to piggyback on that. We just granted a setback of 1 foot that several neighbors had a problem with. And these people are asking for 12 feet for something that even more neighbors seem to be in favor of. So looking at it in that context, I would have a hard time reconciling a no vote with what just happened. I recognize that each situation is unique, is done on its own merits, and that one decision is not a precedent for another one. But that does not escape me. Moreover, I do remember that 815 Ohio discussion, and that actually did involve more encroachment into the setback than was existing previously, whereas this would not change it at all. It would simply extend the construction along the same line. We already had a discussion today about how that 1 foot could extend. So again, I'm thinking 12 feet does not look unreasonable here. So that's where I'm at. Any other discussion? Does anyone have a motion?
Mr. Chairperson, I would move that we grant the variance as requested by the applicant and find that 5 conditions have been met. I could walk through those, but I don't think anybody really needs me to or wants me to. That's my motion.
All right. Is there a second?
Yes, this is Dean. I'll second it.
Okay. Motion by Arad, second by Palos. Staff, will you please call the roll?
Well, this is Staff Liaison Catherine Reek.
Hill,
Yay.
Harrod,
Aye.
Rankin,
Aye.
Shalinski,
Yes.
Palos.
Yes.
And the motion carries 5-0.
All right. Congratulations and welcome to Lawrence.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Is there any other business to come before the board?
Staff Liaison Catherine, we don't have any other business. I do like to keep you all informed if we have potential items that will come before you in the following month. And currently we do at least have one item that will be before you then, so.
All right. Do any board members have anything further? If not, I would love to hear a motion to adjourn. If so, then please
This is
come
Dean.
forward with it.
This is Dean. I'm sorry to belabor it or prolong the meeting. Just Catherine, I spoke with Mandy, the attorney that's representing the city for the lawsuit that's been submitted by the Pennsylvania Line Group. And she talked to me about what my questions were, can we talk to people about it who were involved? And of course she said no, and I just wanted to be affirmed with that. But she also said that the city was no longer a party to the lawsuit. Is that correct?
That's more info than I had. So if she has relayed that to you, then I would imagine that is correct.
Okay, well, that's what she told me.
Yeah.
Because she said if I had any, and I had explained that you as staff, because you were party to it, couldn't respond to any of our questions. So I'll wait till next month and ask my questions of you so that you
Sounds
can be, you are able to address them. That's it for me.
All right. Thank you for doing your homework.
Yeah.
Anything else from board members? All right, I would love to hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Harrod,
I'm assuming there's a second somewhere out there.
Give me a second. I'll second.
okay, moved by Harrod, second by Rankin. Staff, please call the roll.
Yeah. Hill,
Yes.
Harrod,
Aye.
Rankin,
Aye.
Shalinski,
Aye.
and Palos.
Aye.
And meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
All right,
you.
thanks, everyone. We will see you next month.